The Super Bowl is the annual championship game of the National Football League, the highest level of professional football in the United States, culminating a season that begins in the late summer of the previous calendar year. The Super Bowl uses Roman numerals to identify each game, rather than the year in which it is held. For example, Super Bowl I was played on January 15, 1967, following the 1966 regular season. The most recent game, Super Bowl XLVIII, was played on February 2, 2014, following the 2013 season. The game was created as part of a merger agreement between the NFL and its then rival league, the American Football League. It was agreed that the two leagues' champion teams would play in the AFLA Euro NFL World Championship game until the merger was to officially begin in 1970. After the merger, each league was redesignated as a conference, and the game was then played between the conference champions. Currently, the National Football Conference leads the league with 26 wins to 22 wins for the American Football Conference. The Pittsburgh Steelers hold the record for Super Bowl victories with 6. The day on which the Super Bowl is played, now considered by some a de facto American national holiday, is called Super Bowl Sunday. It is the second largest day for U.S. food consumption, after Thanksgiving Day. In addition, the Super Bowl has frequently been the most watched American television broadcast of the year. The 4 most watched broadcasts in U.S. television history are Super Bowls. In 2014, Super Bowl XLVIII became the most watched American television program in history with an average audience of 111.5 million viewers, the 4th time in 5 years the game had set a record, starting with the 2010 Super Bowl, which itself had taken over the number 1 spot held for 27 years by the final episode of MASH. The Super Bowl is also among the most watched sporting events in the world, almost all audiences being North American, and is second to soccer's UEFA Champions League final as the most watched annual sporting event worldwide. The NFL restricts the use of its Super Bowl trademark. It is frequently called the Big Game or other generic terms by non-sponsoring corporations. Because of the high viewership, commercial airtime during the Super Bowl broadcast is the most expensive of the year, leading to companies regularly developing their most expensive advertisements for this broadcast. As a result, watching and discussing the broadcast's commercials has become a significant aspect of the event. In addition, popular singers and musicians including Michael Jackson, Madonna, Prince, the Rolling Stones, The Who, and Whitney Houston have performed during the event's pre-game and halftime ceremonies. Origin. For 4 decades after its 1920 inception, the NFL successfully fended off several rival leagues. However, in 1960, it encountered its most serious competitor when the American Football League was formed. The AFL vied heavily with the NFL for both players and fans, but by the middle of the decade the strain of competition led to serious merger talks between the two leagues. Prior to the 1966 season, the NFL and AFL reached a merger agreement that was to take effect for the 1970 season. As part of the merger, the champions of the two leagues agreed to meet in a World Championship game for professional American football until the merger was effected. Lamar Hunt, owner of the AFL's Kansas City Chiefs, first used the term Super Bowl to refer to this game in the merger meetings. Hunt would later say the name was likely in his head because his children had been playing with a Super Bowl toy. In a July 25, 1966, letter to NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle, Hunt wrote, "I have kiddingly called it the Super Bowl, which obviously can be improved upon." Although the league's owners decided on the name AFL-NFL Championship Game, the media immediately picked up on Hunt's Super Bowl name, which would become official beginning with the 3rd annual game. The Super Bowl name was derived from the bowl game, a postseason college football game. The original bowl game was the Rose Bowl game in Pasadena, California, which was first played in 1902 as the tournament East-West football game as part of the Pasadena Tournament of Roses and moved to the new Rose Bowl Stadium in 1923. The stadium got its name from the fact that the game played there was part of the Tournament of Roses and that it was shaped like a bowl, much like the Yale Bowl in New Haven, Connecticut. The Tournament of Roses football game itself eventually came to be known as the Rose Bowl game. Exploiting the Rose Bowl game's popularity, postseason college football contests were created for Miami, New Orleans, and El Paso, Texas in 1935, and for Dallas in 1937. Thus, by the time the first Super Bowl was played, the term bowl for any big-time American football game was well established. After the NFL's Green Bay Packers won the first two Super Bowls, some team owners feared for the future of the merger. At the time, many doubted the competitiveness of AFL teams compared with their NFL counterparts, though that perception changed when the AFL's New York Jets defeated the NFL's Baltimore Colts in Super Bowl III in Miami. 1 year later, the AFL's Kansas City Chiefs defeated the NFL's Minnesota Vikings 23-7 in Super Bowl IV in New Orleans, which was the final AFL-NFL World Championship game played before the merger. Beginning with the 1970 season, the NFL realigned into two conferences. The former AFL teams plus 3 NFL teams would constitute the American Football Conference, while the remaining NFL clubs would form the National Football Conference. The champions of the two conferences would play each other in the Super Bowl. The winning team receives the Vince Lombardi Trophy, named after the coach of the Green Bay Packers, who won the first two Super Bowl games and 3 of the 5 preceding NFL championships in 1961, 1962, and 1965. Following Lombardi's death in September 1970, the trophy was named the Vince Lombardi Trophy, and was the first awarded as such to the Baltimore Colts following their win in Super Bowl V in Miami. Date: the game is played annually on a Sunday as the final game of the NFL playoffs. Originally, the game took place in early to mid-January, following a 14-game regular season and 2 rounds of playoffs. Over the years, the date of the Super Bowl has progressed from the second Sunday in January, to the third, then the fourth Sunday in January. The game is currently played on the first Sunday in February, given the current 17-week regular season in 3 rounds of playoffs. Also, February is television sweeps month, thus affording the television network carrying the game an immense opportunity to pad its viewership when negotiating for advertising revenue. The progression of the dates of the Super Bowl was caused by several factors: the expansion of the NFL's regular season in 1978 from 14 games to 16. The expansion of the pre-Super Bowl playoff field from 6 teams prior to the merger, to 8 in the 1970-71 season, then to 10 in 1978-79, and finally 12 in 1990-91, necessitating additional rounds of playoffs. The addition of the regular season by week in the 1990s, and the decision to start the regular season the week following Labor Day. To date, 36 games have been played in January, and 12 in February. The earliest game played was Super Bowl XI on January 9, 1977. The latest played was Super Bowl XLVIII on February 7, 2010. The most frequent date for the game has been January 26, with 4 games played. Between January 9 and February 7, the only dates not to feature the game have been January 10, 19, and 23. Super Bowl XLVIII was the first Super Bowl played on February 2, a date commonly celebrated as Groundhog Day. Game history. The Pittsburgh Steelers have won 6 Super Bowls, the most of any team. The Dallas Cowboys and San Francisco 49ers have 5 victories each. And both the Green Bay Packers and New York Giants have 4 Super Bowl championships. 13 other NFL franchises have won at least 1 Super Bowl. 10 teams have appeared in Super Bowl games without a win. The Minnesota Vikings were the first team to have appeared a record 4 times without a win. The Buffalo Bills played in a record 4 Super Bowls in a row, and lost every one. 4 teams have never appeared in a Super Bowl. The Browns and Lions both won NFL championships prior to the Super Bowl's creation, while the Jaguars and Texans are both recent NFL expansion teams. The Minnesota Vikings won the last NFL championship before the merger, but lost to the AFL champion Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl IV. 1960s, early history. The Green Bay Packers won the first 2 Super Bowls, defeating the Kansas City Chiefs and Oakland Raiders following the 1966 and 1967 seasons, respectively. The Packers were led by quarterback Bart Starr, who was named the most valuable player for both games. These two championships, coupled with the Packers' NFL championships in 1961, 1962, and 1965, amount to the most successful stretch in NFL history. 5 championships in 7 years. As owners of arguably the only true NFL dynasty, Green Bay, Wisconsin has been named Titletown, USA. In Super Bowl III, the AFL's New York Jets defeated the 18-point favorite Baltimore Colts of the NFL, 16-7. The Jets were led by quarterback Joe Namath and former Colts head coach Weeby Bank, and their victory proved that the AFL was the NFL's competitive equal. This was reinforced the following year, when the AFL's Kansas City Chiefs defeated the NFL's Minnesota Vikings 23-7 in Super Bowl IV. 1970s, dominant franchises. After the AFL-NFL merger was completed in 1970, 3 franchises the Dallas Cowboys, Miami Dolphins, and Pittsburgh Steelers would go on to dominate the 1970s, winning a combined 8 Super Bowls in the decade. The Baltimore Colts, now a member of the AFC, would start the decade by defeating the Cowboys in Super Bowl V, a game which is notable as being the only Super Bowl to date in which a player from the losing team won the MVP award. The Cowboys, coming back from a loss the previous season, won Super Bowl VI over the Dolphins. However, this would be the Dolphins' final loss in over a year, as the next year, the Dolphins would go 14-0 in the regular season, and cap it off with a victory in Super Bowl VII, becoming the first and only team to finish an entire regular season in postseason perfect. The Dolphins would win Super Bowl VIII a year later. In the late 1970s, the Steelers became the first NFL dynasty of the post-merger era by winning 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. They were led by head coach Chuck Noll, the play of offensive stars Terry Bradshaw, Franco Harris, Lynn Swann, John Stallworth, and Mike Webster, and their dominant steel curtain defense, led by Mean Joe Green, L.C. Greenwood, Ernie Holmes, Mel Blount, Jack Ham, and Jack Lambert. The coaches and administrators also were part of the dynasty's greatness, as evidenced by the team's final pieces being part of the famous 1974 draft. The selections in that class have been considered the best by any pro franchise ever, as Pittsburgh selected 4 future Hall of Famers, the most for any team in any sport in a single draft. The Steelers were the first team to win 3 and then 4 Super Bowls and appeared in 6 AFC Championship games during the decade, making the playoffs in 8 straight seasons. 9 players and 3 coaches and administrators on the team have been inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Pittsburgh still remains the only team to win back-to-back Super Bowls twice and 4 Super Bowls in a 6-year period. The Steelers dynasty was interrupted only by the Cowboys winning their second Super Bowl of the decade and the Oakland Raiders' Super Bowl XI win. 1980s and 1990s, the NFC's winning streak. In the 1980s and 1990s, the tables turned for the AFC, as the NFC dominated the Super Bowls of the new decade and most of those of the 1990s. The NFC won 16 of the 20 Super Bowls during these 2 decades, including 13 straight from Super Bowl XIX to Super Bowl XXXI. The most successful team of the 1980s was the San Francisco 49ers, which featured the West Coast Offensive Hall of Fame head coach Bill Walsh. This offense was led by 3-time Super Bowl MVP and Hall of Fame quarterback Joe Montana, Super Bowl MVP and Hall of Fame wide receiver Jerry Rice, and tight end Brent Jones. Under their leadership, the 49ers won 4 Super Bowls in the decade and made 9 playoff appearances between 1981 and 1990, including 8 division championships, becoming the second dynasty of the post-merger NFL. The 1980s also produced the 1985 Chicago Bears, who posted an 18-1 record under head coach Mike Ditka, colorful quarterback Jim McMahon, and Hall of Fame running back Walter Payton. Their team won Super Bowl XX in dominating fashion. The Washington Redskins and New York Giants were also top teams of this period. The Redskins won Super Bowl XVII, XXII and XXVI. The Giants claimed Super Bowls XXI and XXV. As in the 1970s, the Oakland Raiders were the only team to interrupt the Super Bowl dominance of other teams. They won Super Bowls XV and XVIII, following several seasons with poor records in 1980s. The Dallas Cowboys rose back to prominence in the 1990s. During this decade, the Cowboys made postseason appearances every year except for the seasons of 1990 and 1997. From 1992 to 1996, the Cowboys won their division championship each year. In this same period, the Buffalo Bills had made their mark, reaching the Super Bowl for 4 consecutive years, only to lose in all of them. After Super Bowl championships by division rivals New York and Washington, the Cowboys won 3 of the next 4 Super Bowls, led by quarterback Troy Aikman, running back Emmitt Smith, and wide receiver Michael Irvin. All 3 of these players went to the Hall of Fame. The Cowboys' streak was interrupted by the 49ers, who won their league-leading 5th title overall with Super Bowl XXIX in dominating fashion under Super Bowl MVP and Hall of Fame quarterback Steve Young, Hall of Fame wide receiver Jerry Rice, and Hall of Fame cornerback Deion Sanders. However, the Cowboys' victory in Super Bowl XXX the next year also gave them 5 titles overall, and they did so with Deion Sanders after he won the Super Bowl the previous year with the San Francisco 49ers. The NFC's winning streak was continued by the Green Bay Packers, who, under quarterback Brett Favre, won Super Bowl XXXI, their first championship since Super Bowl II in the late 1960s. 1997 Euro 2009, AFC resurgence. During this period, the Denver Broncos ended the NFC's long Super Bowl streak and started a stretch in which AFC teams won 10 out of 13 Super Bowls. The remaining AFC victories were split among the Patriots, Steelers, Ravens, and Colts. In the years between 2001 and 2011, 3 teams the Patriots, Steelers, and Colts accounted for 10 of the AFC Super Bowl appearances, with those same teams often meeting each other earlier in the playoffs. Meanwhile, the NFC saw a different representative in the Super Bowl every season from 2001 through 2010. Super Bowl XXXII saw quarterback John Elway and running back Terrell Davis lead the Denver Broncos to an upset victory over the defending champion Packers, snapping the NFC's winning streak and starting a streak in which AFC teams would win 8 of the next 10 Super Bowls, and 10 out of the next 13. This marked Elway's first Super Bowl championship in 4 attempts. The Broncos defeated the Atlanta Falcons in the following Super Bowl, which would be Elway's final game. The surprising St. Louis Rams would close out the 1990s by logging an NFC win in Super Bowl XXXIV over the Tennessee Titans. Super Bowl XXXV was played by the AFC's Baltimore Ravens and the NFC's New York Giants. The Ravens defeated the Giants by the score of 34-7. The game was played on January 28, 2001, at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida. The New England Patriots became the dominant team throughout the early 2000s, winning the championship 3 out of 4 years early in the decade. They would become only the second team in the history of the NFL to do so. In Super Bowl XXXVI, first-year starting quarterback Tom Brady led his team to a 20-17 upset victory over the St. Louis Rams. Brady would go on to win the MVP award for this game. The Patriots also won Super Bowls XXVI and XXXIX, defeating the Carolina Panthers and the Philadelphia Eagles respectively. This 4-year stretch of Patriot dominance was only interrupted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' 48-21 Super Bowl XXXVII victory over the Oakland Raiders. The Pittsburgh Steelers and Indianapolis Colts continued the era of AFC dominance by winning Super Bowls XL and XLI in 2005-06 and 2006-07, respectively, defeating the Seattle Seahawks and Chicago Bears. In the 2007 season, the Patriots became the second team in NFL history to have a perfect regular season record, after the 1972 Miami Dolphins, and the first to finish 16-0. They easily marched through the AFC playoffs and were heavy favorites in Super Bowl XLII. However, they lost that game to the New York Giants 17-14. The following season, the Steelers logged their record sixth Super Bowl title in a 27-23, final-minute victory against the Arizona Cardinals. 2010 present, the NFC re-emerges. The 2010s have seen a return to dominance by NFC teams. Between 2010 and 2014, 4 of the 5 Super Bowl winners hailed from the NFC. The Giants won another title after the 2011 season, again defeating the Patriots in Super Bowl XLVIII. Prior to that Super Bowl victory, the New Orleans Saints won their first by defeating the Indianapolis Colts in February 2010. And the Green Bay Packers won their 4th Super Bowl and record 13th NFL championship overall by defeating the Pittsburgh Steelers in February 2011. The Baltimore Ravens interrupted the NFC's victory parade by winning Super Bowl XLVIII in a 34-31 thriller over the San Francisco 49ers. Super Bowl XLVIII, played at New Jersey's MetLife Stadium in February 2014, was the first Super Bowl held outdoors in a cold-weather environment. The Seattle Seahawks won their first NFL title with a lopsided 43-8 defeat of the Denver Broncos, in a highly touted matchup that pitted Seattle's top-ranked defense against a Peyton Manning-led Denver offense that had broken the NFL single-season scoring record. The Super Bowls of the 2000s and early 2010s are notable for the performances of several of the participating quarterbacks. During that era, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, Kurt Warner, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Flacco and Russell Wilson have all added Super Bowl championships to their lists of individual accomplishments. Television coverage and ratings. The Super Bowl is one of the most watched annual sporting events in the world. The only other annual event that gathers more viewers is the UEFA Champions League final, which surpassed the Super Bowl XLII in 2009 to become the most watched that year. For many years, the Super Bowl has possessed a large U.S. and global television viewership, and it is often the most watched United States originating television program of the year. The game tends to have high Nielsen television ratings, which is usually around a 40 rating and 60 share. This means that on average, 80 to 90 million people from the United States are tuned into the Super Bowl at any given moment. In press releases preceding each year's event, the NFL typically claims that that year's Super Bowl will have a potential worldwide audience of around 1 billion people in over 200 countries. This figure refers to the number of people able to watch the game, not the number of people actually watching. However, the statements have been frequently misinterpreted in various media as referring to the latter figure, leading to a common misperception about the game's actual global audience. The New York-based media research firm Initiative measured the global audience for the 2005 Super Bowl at 93 million people, with 98% of that figure being viewers in North America, which meant roughly 2 million people outside North America watched the Super Bowl that year. 2014 Super Bowl XLVIII holds the record for total number of U.S. viewers, with a final number of 112.2 million, making the game the most viewed television broadcast of any kind in American history. The halftime show was the most watched ever with 115.3 million viewers tuning in, and an all-time high of 167 million viewers in the United States had watched several portions of the Super Bowl 2014 broadcast. The game set a record for total viewers for the 4th time in 5 years. The highest-rated game according to Nielsen was Super Bowl XVII in 1982, which was watched in 49.1% of households, or 40,020,000 households at the time. Ratings for that game, a San Francisco victory over Cincinnati, may have been aided by a large blizzard that had affected much of the northeastern United States on game day, leaving residents to stay at home more than usual. Super Bowl XVI still ranks 4th on Nielsen's list of top-rated programs of all time, and 3 other Super Bowls, XII, XVII, and XX, made the top 10. Famous commercial campaigns include the Budweiser Bud Bowl campaign and the 1999 and 2000 ads. Prices have increased every year, with advertisers paying as much as $3.5 million for a 30-second spot during Super Bowl XLVIII in 2012. A segment of the audience tunes into the Super Bowl solely to view commercials. In 2010, Nielsen reported that 51% of Super Bowl viewers tune in for the commercials. The Super Bowl halftime show has spawned another set of alternative entertainment such as the Lingerie Bowl, the Beer Bottle Bowl, and other facets of American culture. The Super Bowl is scheduled for East Coast viewers, and has begun between 6:19 and 6:41 Eastern Standard Time since 1991. Super Bowl on TV, note, years listed are the year the game was actually played rather than what NFL season it is considered to have been. Are not currently broadcasting NFL. The extended current TV contracts with the networks expire after the 2022 season, and the Super Bowl is rotated annually between CBS, Fox and NBC in that order. The first Super Bowl was simultaneously broadcast by CBS and NBC, with each network using the same video feed, but providing its own commentary. Super Bowls Euro 6 were blacked out in the television markets of the host cities, due to league restrictions then in place. Game analyst John Madden is the only person to broadcast a Super Bowl for each of the 4 networks that have televised the game. Lead-out programming. The Super Bowl provides an extremely strong lead into programming following it on the same channel, the effects of which can last for several hours. For instance, in discussing the ratings of a local TV station, Buffalo television critic Alan Pergament noted on the coattails from Super Bowl XLVIII, which aired on CBS, a paid program that ran on Channel 4 at 2:30 in the morning, had a 1.3 rating. FTA Euro unregistered trademark S higher than some CW primetime shows get on WNLO TV, Channel 4 a Euro unregistered trademark S sister station. Because of this strong coattail effect, the network that airs the Super Bowl typically takes advantage of the large audience to air an episode of a hit series, or to premiere the pilot of a promising new one in the lead-out slot, which immediately follows the Super Bowl and post-game coverage. Entertainment. Initially, it was sort of a novelty and so it didn't quite feel right. But it was just like, this is the year. Bands of our generation, you can sort of be seen on a stage like this or, like, not seen. There's not a lot of middle places. It is a tremendous venue. A Euro Bruce Springsteen on why he turned down several invitations to perform at the Super Bowl before finally agreeing to appear in Super Bowl XLVIII. Early Super Bowls featured a halftime show consisting of marching bands from local colleges or high schools. But as the popularity of the game increased, a trend where popular singers and musicians performed during its pre-game ceremonies and the halftime show, or simply sang the national anthem of the United States, emerged. Unlike regular season or playoff games, 30 minutes are allocated for the Super Bowl halftime. The first halftime show to have featured only one star performer was Super Bowl XLVIII in 1993, at which Michael Jackson performed. The NFL specifically went after him to increase viewership and to continue expanding the Super Bowl's realm. Sports bloggers have ranked Jackson's appearance as the #1 Super Bowl halftime show since its inception. Another notable performance came during Super Bowl XLVIII in 2002, when U2 performed. During their third song, Where the Streets Have No Name, the band played under a large projection screen which scrolled through names of the victims of the September 11 attacks. The halftime show of Super Bowl XLVIII in 2004 generated controversy when Justin Timberlake removed a piece of Janet Jackson's top, exposing her right breast with a star-shaped pasty around the nipple. Timberlake and Jackson have maintained that the incident was accidental, calling it a wardrobe malfunction. The game was airing live on CBS, and MTV had produced the halftime show. Immediately after the moment, the footage jump cut to a wide-angle shot and went to a commercial break. However, video captures of the moment in detail circulated quickly on the internet. The NFL, embarrassed by the incident, permanently banned MTV from conducting future halftime shows. This also led to the FCC tightening controls on indecency and fining CBS and CBS-owned stations a total of $550,000 for the incident. The fine was later reversed in July 2008. CBS and MTV eventually split into two separate companies in part because of the fiasco, with CBS going under the control of CBS Corporation and MTV falling under the banner of Viacom. For 6 years following the incident, all of the performers in Super Bowl halftime shows were artists associated with the classic rock genre of the 1970s and 1980s, with only one act playing the entire halftime show. Paul McCartney played Super Bowl XXXIX in 2005, the Rolling Stones played Super Bowl XL in 2006, and The Who played Super Bowl XLIV in 2010. The halftime show returned to a modern act in 2011 with the Black Eyed Peas. But during the halftime show of Super Bowl XLVIII in 2012, MIA gave the middle finger during a performance of Give Me All Your Lovin' with Madonna, which was caught by TV cameras. An attempt to censor the gesture by blurring the entire screen came late. Excluding Super Bowl XXXIX, the famous I'm Going to Disney World advertising campaign took place at every Super Bowl since Super Bowl XXI, when quarterback Phil Simms from the New York Giants became the first player to say the tagline. The Walt Disney Company ran the ad several times during the game, showing several players from both teams practicing the catchphrase. In 2011, Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott said, "It's commonly known as the single largest human trafficking incident in the United States." According to Forbes, 10,000 prostitutes were brought to Miami in 2010 for the Super Bowl. Venue. As of Super Bowl XLVIII, 27 of 48 Super Bowls have been played in 3 cities, New Orleans, the Greater Miami area, and the Greater Los Angeles area. Stadiums that do not host an NFL franchise are not, by rule, prohibited from hosting the Super Bowl, and non-NFL stadiums have hosted the game 9 times, with the Rose Bowl accounting for 5 of these. To date, however, no market or region without an NFL franchise has ever hosted a Super Bowl. All 5 Rose Bowl Super Bowls were hosted before the Los Angeles Rams and Los Angeles Raiders left for St. Louis and Oakland respectively in 1995. No team has ever played the Super Bowl in its home stadium. The closest have been the San Francisco 49ers who played Super Bowl XIX in Stanford Stadium, rather than Candlestick Park, and the Los Angeles Rams who played Super Bowl XIV in the Rose Bowl, rather than the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. In both cases, the stadium in which the Super Bowl was held was perceived to be a better stadium for a large, high-profile event than the stadiums the Rams and 49ers were playing in at the time. This situation has not arisen since 1993, in part because the league has traditionally awarded the Super Bowl in modern times to the newest stadiums. Besides those two, the only other Super Bowl venue that was not the home stadium to an NFL team at the time was Rice Stadium in Houston. The Houston Oilers had played there previously, but moved to the Astrodome several years prior to Super Bowl VIII. The Orange Bowl was the only AFL stadium to host a Super Bowl and the only stadium to host consecutive Super Bowls, hosting Super Bowls II and III. Traditionally, the NFL does not award Super Bowls to stadiums that are located in climates with an expected average daily temperature less than 50 degree Fahrenheit on game day unless the field can be completely covered by a fixed or retractable roof. 5 Super Bowls have been played in northern cities, 2 in the Detroit area Euro Super Bowl XVI at Pontiac Silverdome in Pontiac, Michigan and Super Bowl XL at Ford Field in Detroit, 1 in Minneapolis Euro Super Bowl XXVI, 1 in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium for Super Bowl XLVI, and 1 in the New York Euro Super Bowl XLVII at MetLife Stadium. Only MetLife Stadium did not have a roof, but it was still picked as the host stadium from Super Bowl XLIII in an apparent waiver of the warm climate rule. A 6th Super Bowl is planned in a northern city as Minneapolis has been picked to host Super Bowl LII in 2018 in the new Vikings Stadium. There have been a few instances where the league has yanked the Super Bowl from cities. Super Bowl XXVII in 1993 was originally awarded to Sun Devil Stadium in Tempe, Arizona, but after Arizona voted to not recognize Martin Luther King, Jr. Day in 1990, the NFL moved the game to the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California in protest. After Arizona opted to create the holiday by ballot in 1992, Super Bowl XXX in 1996 was awarded to Tempe. Super Bowl XLIV, slated for February 7, 2010, was withdrawn from New York City's proposed West Side Stadium, because the city, state, and proposed tenants New York Jets could not agree on funding. Super Bowl XLIV was then eventually awarded to Sun Life Stadium in Miami Gardens, Florida. And Super Bowl XLIX in 2015 was originally given to Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, Missouri, but after two sales taxes failed to pass at the ballot box, and opposition by local business leaders and politicians increased, Kansas City eventually withdrew its request to host the game. Super Bowl XLIX was then eventually awarded to University of Phoenix Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. Selection process: the location of the Super Bowl is chosen by the NFL well in advance, usually 3 to 5 years before the game. Cities place bids to host a Super Bowl and are evaluated in terms of stadium renovation and their ability to host. The NFL owners then meet to make a selection on the site. In 2007, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell suggested that a Super Bowl might be played in London, England, perhaps at Wembley Stadium. The game has never been played in a region that lacks an NFL franchise. 7 Super Bowls have been played in Los Angeles, but none since the Los Angeles Raiders and Los Angeles Rams relocated to Oakland and St. Louis respectively in 1995. New Orleans, the site of the 2013 Super Bowl, invested more than $1 billion in infrastructure improvements in the years leading up to the game. Home team designation: the designated home team alternates between the NFC team in odd-numbered games and the AFC team in even-numbered games. This alternation was initiated with the first Super Bowl, when the Green Bay Packers were the designated home team. Regardless of being the home or away team of record, each team has their team word mark painted in one of the end zones along with their conference designation. Designated away teams have won 28 of 48 Super Bowls to date. Since Super Bowl XIII in January 1979, the home team is given the choice of wearing their colored or white jerseys. Formerly, the designated home team was specified to wear their colored jerseys, which resulted in Dallas donning their less familiar dark blue jerseys for Super Bowl V. While most of the home teams in the Super Bowl have chosen to wear their colored jerseys, there have been 4 exceptions. The Cowboys during Super Bowl XIII and XXVII, the Washington Redskins during Super Bowl XVII, and the Pittsburgh Steelers during Super Bowl XL. The Cowboys, since 1965, and Redskins, since the arrival of coach Joe Gibbs in 1981, have traditionally worn white jerseys at home. Meanwhile, the Steelers, who have always worn their black jerseys at home since the AFL-NFL merger in 1970, opted for the white jerseys after winning 3 consecutive playoff games on the road, wearing white. The Steelers' decision was compared with the New England Patriots in Super Bowl XX. The Patriots had worn white jerseys at home during the 1985 season, but after winning road playoff games against the New York Jets and Miami Dolphins wearing red jerseys, New England opted to switch to red for the Super Bowl as the designated home team. White-shirted teams have won 30 of 48 Super Bowls to date. Host cities regions. 15 different regions have hosted Super Bowls. Note: years listed are the year the game was actually played rather than what NFL season it is considered to have been. Host stadiums: a total of 24 different stadiums have hosted, or are scheduled to host, Super Bowls. Note: years listed are the year the game was actually played rather than what NFL season it is considered to have been. Italics indicate a stadium that is now demolished. The original Stanford Stadium, which hosted Super Bowl XIX, was demolished and replaced with a new stadium in 2006. References: a future Super Bowl site, 2015 University of Phoenix Stadium, 2, Glendale, Arizona, 2016 Levi's Stadium, 1, Santa Clara, California, 2017 NRG Stadium, 2, Houston, Texas, 2018. Vikings Stadium, 1, Minneapolis, Minnesota. The game has never been played in a region that lacked an NFL franchise. Those cities without NFL teams are not categorically ineligible to host the event. London, England has occasionally been mentioned as a host city for a Super Bowl in the near future. Wembley Stadium has hosted several NFL games as part of the NFL International Series and is specifically designed for large, individual events. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell has openly discussed the possibility on different occasions. Time zone complications are a significant obstacle to a Super Bowl in London. A typical 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time start would result in the game beginning at 11:30 p.m. local time in London, an unusually late hour to be holding spectator sports. Super Bowl trademark. The NFL is vigilant on stopping what it says is unauthorized commercial use of its trademark terms NFL, Super Bowl, and Super Sunday. As a result, many events and promotions tied to the game, but not sanctioned by the NFL, are asked to refer to it with colloquialisms such as the big game, or other generic descriptions. A radio spot for Planters Nuts parodied this, by saying it would be super to have a bowl of Planters Nuts while watching the big game. And comedian Stephen Colbert began referring to the game in 2014 as the Super Bowl. The NFL claims that the use of the phrase Super Bowl implies an NFL affiliation, and on this basis the league asserts broad rights to restrict how the game may be shown publicly. For example, the league says Super Bowl showings are prohibited in churches or at other events that promote a message, while venues that do not regularly show sporting events cannot show the Super Bowl on any television screen larger than 55 inches. Some critics say the NFL is exaggerating its ownership rights by stating that any use is prohibited, as this contradicts the broad doctrine of fair use in the United States. Legislation was proposed by Utah Senator Orrin Hatch in 2008 to provide an exemption from exclusive rights in copyright for certain non-profit organizations to display live football games, and for other purposes. In 2006, the NFL made an attempt to trademark the big game as well. However, it withdrew the application in 2007 due to growing commercial and public relations opposition to the move, mostly from Stanford University and the University of California, Berkeley and their fans, as the Stanford Cardinal football and California Golden Bears football teams compete in the big game, which has been played since 1892. Additionally, the Mega Millions lottery game was known as the big game from 1996 to 2002. Use of the phrase world champions. Like the other major professional leagues in the United States, the winner of the Super Bowl is usually declared world champions, a title often mocked by non-Americans. Although American football is broadcast around the world, professional teams are scarce outside of the United States, since the 2007 demise of the NFL Europe League. That leads some, even those close to world champions themselves, to question whether the title is accurate. Others feel the title is fitting, since it is the only professional league of its kind. The practice by the U.S. major leagues of using the world champion moniker originates from the World Series, and it was later used during the first 3 Super Bowls when they were referred to as AFL-NFL World Championship games. The phrase is still engraved on the Super Bowl rings. See also, active head coach career Super Bowl history, AFC Championship game, Grey Cup, the equivalent event for the Canadian Football League, history of National Football League Championship, list of national anthem performers at the Super Bowl, list of NFL champions, list of quarterbacks with multiple Super Bowl starts, list of Super Bowl broadcasters, list of Super Bowl champions, list of Super Bowl halftime shows, list of Super Bowl head coaches, list of Super Bowl lead-out programs, list of Super Bowl officials, list of Super Bowl records, National Football League law, NFL honors, league awards program held night before. Super Bowl at host city, NFC championship game, Super Bowl advertising, Super Bowl counter-programming, Super Bowl curse, Super Bowl MVP award, Super Bowl ring, list of NFL franchise postseason droughts, list of NFL franchise postseason streaks, references. Further reading, 2006 NFL Record and Fact Book. Time Incorporated. Home Entertainment. ISBN A1-933405-32-5. Total Football Do, the official encyclopedia of the National Football League. HarperCollins. ISBN A1-933405-32-5. The Sporting News Complete Super Bowl Book 1995. ISBN A0-89204-523. The Super Bowl, an official retrospective with DVD. Ballantine Books. 2005. ISBN A0-345-48719-2. Mackenbridge, Michael. America's Game. Random House. ISBN A0-375-50454-0. Chris Jones. NFL Titans Restrictions on Super Bowl Advertisements. Las Vegas Review-Journal. John Branch. Build It and They Will Come. The New York Times. Super Bowl play-by-plays from USA Today. Last access September 28, 2005. All-time Super Bowl odds from the Sports Network. Last accessed October 16, 2005. 100 Greatest Super Bowl Moments by Kevin Jackson, Jeff Merrin, and David Schoenfield. ESPN.com. Last accessed October 31, 2005. Various authors size 25 Lost Treasures Sports Illustrated, July 11, 2005 PA 114. The Super Bowl I-7. Lost Treasures of NFL Films. ESPN2. January 26, 2001. MTV's Super Bowl Uncensored. MTV. January 27, 2001. Talk shows. CBS, 50 Years from Television City. CBS. April 27, 2002. D. Tommy. Super Bowl Halftime Jinx. Maxim Magazine Online. Retrieved January 25, 2007. The Pro Football Playoff Encyclopedia. ISBN A978-0-9835136-2-9. External links. Official Super Bowl website, Super Bowl fan website, America's Game America's Game, The Super Bowl Champions, an NFL Films documentary of all Super Bowl winning teams, Super Bowl at DMOZ.